In order to introduce Kimberly Johnson properly to you today, I'm going to have to talk about cool. Not cool like riding Suzuki motorcycles at 9 kind of cool. Not cool like once dating a real rock star kind of cool. Not even the kind of cool that you'd think a poetry geek like me would get all swoony over. What with the several published books, including 3 poetry collections, a translation of Virgil, studies on Renaissance literature, and a recent anthology of devotional poetry that won the USA Book Award in General Religion this year, and the many grants and fellowships, the MA from Johns Hopkins, the MFA from Iowa, and the PhD in Renaissance literature from the University of California at Berkeley. No, I want to talk instead about the profound cool of the liturgical hours, of psalters, prayers, elegies, and lauds. In these, her poetry reaches for a legible heaven, from a place where the land was, and beautifully. Wishes for obvious and shotgun angels to transcend our jerry-built epiphanies. Says, Hallelujah and Adiaphora and Te Deum, confesses roughhouse grace, bruised and bent to glory. Says, listen if your ears be true. Kim's poetry is musical and raw, restrained and resounding, perfectly coiled and sprung with the word. In Echo, she writes, glory be to God for bungled things, for all things marred or misbegotten, praise him. Today, we're especially grateful to him also for her. I, too, think I can feel us all getting cooler already. It's my honor to introduce our very own Kim Johnson.
I've been more nervous about that introduction than anything for the past 5 years. So a month ago, thank you, Adrian. I've been sweating. He's been texting me these sort of provocative things, and I'm like, what is he saying? What is he going to say? A month ago was the anniversary of the day that Charles Yeager broke the sound barrier. So I'm going to start reading this poem, a nocturnal upon St. Chuck Yeager's Day. Here comes that sonic boom, thumping at the chest like a kick drum, the first and final beat of a tune called Too Late. Ever too late, the event reveals its narrative to the sense, ever too slow on the uptake. Ever life hurdles heartbreak to heartbreaker, ever life hurdles heartbreak to heartbreak, while I rattle around in its mock cone, trying to work out the ever aftermath. To the palm that rests atop the trembling diaphragm, not to calm, but to confirm the body's record, all this shock and roar is a comfort. After such rough cleavings, molecule from molecule, the sound shorn back from the air and stacked upon itself, there should be noise. There should be a bomb blast, bell-knocking bone jar of noise, a jolt to all wavelengths, a tremor through the pavement, tripping car alarms and dog howls to the proof that something happened. Something happened. Something wider than the sky got broken. Something faster than a word arrowed into it. And that damned and blessed sonic boom is rolling on past me, drumming up the next dirge by the time I know to mourn whatever it was. Thank you all for being here today. I don't know if I can make things entertaining when there's snow outside, but I will try to do so. In this book, this new book of mine that has just come out, there are a number of poems that are spoken by non-human entities. And the titles indicate the speakers of these poems. I thought I'd read a little handful of these poems. This is called Bug Zapper. Because it's interesting to put yourself in the position of others, to be an empathetic person, right? Bug Zapper. Come, flame moth. Come, feathered thornwing, darkling beetle, and Asian lady. And come, O night wasp. Swift through the soft air fly to where I hang allurement. I am caged moon. I am firefly phosphorescence slow gracing to the roof tree. I am anything but this low-watt hum, this dim fluorescent sham slung rusting from the rain gutter, cord rubbed raw to the next rain's sputter, short out and dark. When you arc from the ether to my electrical field, I am ethereal, something worth steering for. And if, when you reach me, you should vaporize, well, that's what we celestials do. We firework, we meteor in streaks, lit up like a house afire, like bad wiring on dry rot wood. My brief lovelies, let us spark while we can. I feel a hard rain coming on. And the speaker of this next poem, in the title, is Wrecking Ball. With what stern determination I love that wall. Its red height so certain I must fling myself at it, an erratic embarrassment of a fling, chain wobbling through my drunk parabola to kiss the brick. Can I help it that I kiss with all my force? Nuzzled to dust, all my beloveds must wish to have gone unregarded. What do I wish for? The end of love. Okay, this one's called Metronome. This is what happens when a white girl from Utah listens to too much Jay-Z. Metronome. I'm done with this buck and wing, the shuck and jive of marking time for you. A spring sprung, a gear catch at each left-hand lurch, and zing, I've a hitch in my get-along. I lopside like a kite ride, struggle upright from the downswing, my hammer hand dragging in the end zone. I am become an undependulum. Isn't this bliss, this shift from old reliable to whiplash skip in a quicker than a tick? For so long I have so longed not to steady you, steady your tune, bury my backbeat in the background. Let the town talk about my late stroke, scold that I put the sin in syncopate. I'll take my limp any time over your well-tempoed clever in the key of never again. And when I'm left to hap my own hazard, useless in my slap and dash, trash as trash talk, I'll hang my long left and shrug, at least I'm loud. So in the southeastern part of the United States, there's this area, this habitat that is particularly congenial to the ivory-billed woodpecker, or was for many years. The ivory-billed woodpecker may or may not be extinct. They thought it was extinct in the early part of the 20th century. And so all these scientists went out into the swamps to see if they could find evidence that the ivory-billed woodpecker was still alive, and they didn't see any, and they were very depressed. They were going back to their car after several weeks of trying to find an ivory-billed woodpecker, and like one flew out of a tree and perched on somebody's shoulder. So they're like, oh, not extinct. But then they didn't see another one for 20 years or 30 years. And after 30 years, people were saying, oh, I guess the ivory-billed woodpecker is extinct. So they went out to confirm and didn't find anything, and saw no nests and no traces that there were baby ivory-billed woodpeckers around. So they're like, oh, the ivory-billed woodpecker is extinct. But no. And then one showed up. And so this ivory-billed woodpecker has been irritating scientists for about 100 years now. I think the last confirmed or suspected sighting of an ivory-billed woodpecker was in the beginning part of the 21st century. So they keep wanting to declare the ivory-billed woodpecker gone, and then it keeps surprising them. So this poem is spoken by one. In the South, the sort of colloquial name for the ivory-billed woodpecker is the Lord God bird, because they're very big. They have a big dramatic beak, and they have like black and white wings, and they have a big red crown of feathers on their head. And so in the South, they call them the Lord God bird, because when you see one flying at your head, you go, oh, Lord God, like that. So the Lord God bird, Campophyllus principalis. Knock, knock on the cracked bark of the sweet gum, and knock, knock in echo through cypresses, swamp sunk to their bent knees. The punchline is that there's no punchline, only silence closing like a cloud around the place where from you thought you heard me call. You can yoo-hoo your heart out. I will hidden hold my operatic plumage, fold wings over my ivory and my wound-red crown. I will wind so tight myself in feather and fern that you who've tramped years through this tract with your Kodaks, your boom mic humming dumbly reel to reel, must take heavy up the bureaucratic pen and scratch the fatal asterisk to my name. Then, when you've closed your logbook and loaded up your John boat with all those unconsoling tools, then will I swoop the Spanish moss, my white wingtips aflash in the canopy like the world's last morning, and jaw my tin horn squawk from trunk to trunk. It's a trick I picked up from the grubs, pathing the fat phloem far beneath the bark, for whose love my bill evolved its ivory curve, my lash-flicking tongue its barb. If I made myself easy to be found, why would you look? And this last poem in this set that I'll read today, I'll give a shout out to Phil Snyder, who gave me some info a few years ago when I was in a crucial place with this poem. He taught me the difference between a cowboy and a cow punch, and I hope that I will not since like a poem in a published book is now based on this, I hope I have not misunderstood it, but as I understood it, a cowboy takes care of the cows close to home, and a cow punch drives them a long way. Good? Okay, Cow Punch is the name of this poem. Unhobble your hardscrabble horses, soul. The night before us is steep and long, and the steers won't drive themselves. They moan in the gloaming and clack horns one to another's as to the comfort of fence posts. Their nerves are barbed wire. Footsore and far from pasture, we fret a course across the endless range, the sage flats, a gray disorientation of spooks and noise to all horizons. I, with my whistle, my whip-crack consistency, am their only known thing, and they will follow me anywhere, to the hilltop, the feedlot, the bolt gun's red floor. The wind is picking up, trawling its weather. Snow will hard fall like a heavy body and shove the dawn back down. And if we, frostburnt, snowblind, shoulder through the storm to find our destination, it will kill us. Soul, I will follow you anywhere. That was a bummer. Let's read something nicer. This probably is the point in a reading when I like to wake up the menfolk by talking about castration. So I once, some of you have heard this anecdote before. I once heard my dad talking with a childhood buddy again, reminiscing about the good old days when they would castrate the sheep and how they used to do that the old-fashioned way, without all the newfangled contraptions. Before there were all these tools and such, it was much easier and much faster, and some would argue much cleaner, just to flip the thing over and do it with your teeth. So once I heard my dad and his buddy talking about that, that sticks with you. Doesn't go away. Can't unhear that. So I wrote a poem. The procedure is called Marking the Lambs, and this poem is called Marking the Lambs. As crickets geiger up for spring, we corral the ram lambs. They stutter and dance against the fence, wheezing for the ewes. Down, wince, down, wretch. Up one and flip his back to mud, knee to sternum. The banded tail will black to wizen, prune off easy. But marking is all trespass. Thumb the soft belly to pop the scrotum out, then lunge and turn the mind away, teeth working to snap back and spit. I try not to taste, but I am all mouth, all salt blood and lanolin. I hear their bleatings through my tongue. They call it marking for the tooth scars on the belly, but when I speak tonight, my words will sputter and decay, and when try to say your name, I will pronounce it elegy. All All right, so you may have heard Steve talk about this devotional lyric symposium that's next week. I would encourage you all to attend as many sessions of that as you would like to do. There are going to be a number of poets from around the country reading next week and exploring what it's like at this point in history to be writing devotional poetry. That is, to be writing in a tradition of spirituality that has about 3 millennia of convention behind it. So I thought maybe I'd read just one or two, like to whet the appetite of my own endeavors in this field. So this poem is, the title forces me to become strange. The title is 2 brackets like that with a big space in between, followed by a period. And it's meant to denote resigned exasperation. And it's meant to sound like this. Okay, so that's the title of this poem. I'll do it again. And there are asterisks in this poem, which I will indicate by a little star sign. Okay, one more time. Okay. Through weather's declensions, through spring's steep degrees, through 5 shapes of snow, through the thunderhead's sexual green over green geometrical acreage, through every stormy declension of the heart, I have cried your name. It is a histrionics litany, recited from this, my usual station, unrequited. Where else such sighs and bluster, such tropics of squalling passion? And what is wind but a dialect of longing? The high pressure rushing to fill the low, the sky trying to slake its heats against the earth's asymptotic cool, its somersaulting cools against the earth's radiance. All weather springs from currents of failed desire. No wonder the wind, when it says anything at all, howls. O fugitive God, my glorious jilt, my heart has learned a tempest's grammar in your pursuit. Listen, it thunders up its truest, its most hopeless prayers for you. What will I read now? How about one more in that vein? So, what do I want to say about this poem? I want to say, do you all know the story of Eloise and Abelard? Is that something that, no, there's lots of no's, more no's than I was expecting. Okay, so Eloise and Abelard lived several hundred years ago, and Abelard was a monk, and he was Eloise's tutor, and then they fell in love, and they secretly ran off together, and then he got in big trouble and she got in big trouble. She got sent to a convent and he got sent to a monastery, and they wrote letters to one another, but she was pregnant, she had a baby, and they named the baby Astrolabe, which is my favorite detail of the entire story, because I would like to name all my children, and possibly some of yours, after scientific instruments. So that's the backstory of some of this poem. And this poem begins with, I should tell you that Abelard wrote his memoir, The Disastrous Story of His Life, which he called The Story of My Calamities. So this poem is called The Story of My Calamities, and it begins with an epigraph from Augustine. Augustine says, essentially, the whole scripture God sends to us as a love letter by which he tries to provoke us to love him. O God, my God, would you were an Abelard, bowing each long midnight in your close cell over paper, quilling so fervent strokes to tear the page, my sister, my spouse. Would you brooded on the wide between us, unmanned with love, and in a florid hand hatched assignations, which I in secret bosomed up, panting for the hour. Constant then, and sure I'd be, as heaven-centered as an astrolabe. But I can't fathom your love letters, libertine troth to the second person plural, dry agape, and all your woo is touch me not. My Lord, my flesh your tablet make. Inscribe desire in me. So there was this thing that happened in the 17th century, number of things. One of them was that, the stock market bubble of a few years ago and the dot-com bubble and the housing bubble, all these bubbles that have taken place. In the 17th century, there was an awesome event. It was the tulip bubble. There was tulip mania that swept Europe, primarily Holland. And people were like mortgaging their houses to buy these rare bulbs. They were trying to, it was a collector's market, right? So people would run out and try to buy as many different colors and varieties of tulips as they possibly could, and then they would own them. And famously, let's see, Jason, is it a field was, Andrew Marvell writes about how a field was sold to buy a single tulip bulb. That's one of the famous, cautionary anecdotes from the middle to the late 17th century. So do not mortgage your fields to buy tulip bulbs. That's the lesson that history gives us here. So something that I find fascinating is that the reason that these tulip bulbs were so valuable and so ferociously collected is that they had a virus it was called the tulip mosaic virus, and it would infiltrate the bulb, and that would cause spontaneous corruptions or spontaneous changes in coloration. So like a collector would go out and try and find all the bulbs that he could of one particular color or a whole variety of colors, but as in successive seasons, you couldn't predict what it would look like because the virus would mutate the genetic coding in the tulip bulb. So it was always eluding the collectors, which I think is kind of cool. So this poem is called A Benediction on the Tulpenwood of 17th century Holland. Tulpenwood is what they called tulip crazy. Blessed be the disease, the virus subtle plunging to the heart of every bulb, to break as streaks and flames through the conservatory, waxy petals freaked with frantic pinks and periwinkles. Blessed be the rankle that stains its mosaic cell to cell, forcing through each blousy, stem-heavy bloom, color undreamed by the fayest confectioner until the very air seems motley. Blessed the collectors infected by desire. How they want, how they lick their lips as if they would devour at the bud each sudden new original and its exponential next. How they settle for a name that they can hold between the teeth, biting down against this infinite variety. And blessed, oh blessed, all those names, all the neat rows of them in the ledger, a dear anthology of failures. The semper fidelis subsides to the fidelis in a season. The volition evolves into the volitant. Blessed that rage to corner the rarest cultivar, to press tight as in a book each beauty made beautiful by its not enduring. Bookkeeper, I am your daughter, believing that by loving I could hold what I loved, forgetting that I loved because I couldn't. This new book of mine concludes with a 26-page section of prose poetry. And each section takes its name from one of the letters of the military alphabet, so like Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, etc. And the whole poem is called Siege Psalter, and I'm imagining that it's a long complaint against an auditor who is simultaneously God and a really, really disappointing beloved. So I'll read a few sections from that poem. Charlie, sing a new song, a carol, say, to constancy, not the North Star's stubborn pivot boring night-long through the pole, but the modest steadfastness of the Big Dipper. Draw a line across its basin, star to star, and then beyond the constellation till you find, near invisible, true north. Selfless gesture, at every hour to point and point away to some obscure and ever-fixed mark, to be prized for pure devotion, for how it bears the gaze away. Isn't that how it is in love as in war? Someone gets to pull the wagon, and someone, girding his smallness in glittering mail, gets to be Charlemagne. Echo. We'd make a legendary pair. You love the sound of your own voice, and I have to have the last word. But I'm no nymph pleading in perfect refrain, no ping for the smug submariner. Insubordinate, I embellish your cadence call. I run your reverb through my wah-wah, turn all your periods to colons. I slant if I rhyme at all. I am here in this deviance, and I'm trying to help you find me, as if you were trying to find me. India. Having smacked down the Bactrian satrapies, Alexander dragged his armies eastward, over the Hindu Kush, through defiant foothills, against sickness and mutiny and the unprovisionable mass of his battalions to the great river's golden sands. So hungered he for the known world that he impious raised a hemisphere to possess its wreckage. Lucky, lucky world to be so fiercely wanted. And Delta. When thundering through the heavens I hear the B-2 stealth bomber, its elusive grace as it banks trailing fractals from its skin, its clandestine maneuvers, its trinitarian aerodynamism, I think of God. Dropping what ordnance I cannot tell, a fusillade unseen from where I cannot tell, kilotons to knock me to confusion. Oh, stealth bomber, intermediary for the illegible, plead for me now, in the hour of my whatever. I'll read something new. I'm a very slow writer. I don't have a lot new, but I'll read something new. Do you know what a farthingale is? Farthingale is, okay, you've seen the pictures of the ladies in the 18th, 19th century wearing the big hoopy skirt, like Scarlett O'Hara, the big hoopy skirt thing. It's underneath. The thing that makes the big hoopy skirt is the giant cage made out of like wicker or whalebone or some combination between the two. That's called a farthingale. I always thought that farthingale had some etymological connection to like money and wind, and that I thought was really cool. But then I went and investigated it, and in fact, no, it has nothing to do with either of those things. It's really just a corruption of a French word, which is so much less interesting to me. So, but I'm reclaiming it. Farthingale. Lo, my pennyworth of wind blown, hurricane of lash and whalebone, how often have I fastened its billows about me, sashed beneath furbelows. Tight cinches the corset, tighter the stays, smooth and tight for the bodice's lacings. But my underpinnings upgust, from ankle to thigh to the untrussed cyclonic eye of me. I'm the low-pressure system sinking the barometer, the microburst havocing the weathercock, while I battened down to placid seem as a white-glove Sunday in June. Like all tempests, I say, hallelujah for the cage, the isobars, the wickerwork and cartilage, within whose strictures wildness can wind itself up to the shape of its binding. It's the lid sets the tea kettle rocking at the boil, the shell's song the gunpowder sings. While I was walking over here with Steve Tuttle, the gentleman in front of this room, I said to him that I had this poem that is almost done. I've been working on it for months, and I thought it's got like 2 lines left, and I thought that I'd be able to read it today. But then I didn't finish it because I write really slowly. But then Steve said you should read it anyway. So I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to say, and then it ends. So I think it's going to be called Fail. Ironic, that didn't even occur to me. Okay. A spill of coppers, dead bees scattered across the grass from the hive's dropped purse. In a rotten crotch of my tree trunk humming 1 to 1 to 100, they bunched to their hot industry. Honey-mouthed, honey-handed, they handled nectar to hexagons, the broody queen bustling by chambers, her much motherly fuss. Tucked in a covert of bark, the bulge of it filled in a fortnight, banked and excitable as a circuit box. Better a live wire snapping its spark and writhe than this collapse, the hive and all its hopes undone. Under a dinless noon, the bee bodies keep their secrets. What sly menace breached their stingered care, etc. That's all I got. I'll let you know if I finish it sometime. I'm slow. Okay, maybe I'll just read like how long do you want me to go? Few. I want to read fewer questions. I'll read or answer fewer questions. I'll read like 3 or 4 more. Okay. This is called crepuscular, which is like the sundowny atmosphere light. Crepuscular. What a drubbing this sundown. Its gloom hunting out my sorest remorses to bludgeon me with. That's what the light does in autumn, slanting southward and brownly between the hunched houses of the neighborhood. It falls against the sidewalk like a slab of meat, like a mugging the passers-by pass by. The church bells bang hollow vespers. Is there any sound more forsaken than the rainbird's smack across the spent grass? Yes. The ignition jump of a car heading anywhere, tail lights red as the rubber stamp on a divorce decree. Its diminishing rev, a metaphor for the failure of metaphor. The car is a car leaving, and then left. Matins for the last frost. Patient in their dark hibernacle wait the twinned lobes of the tulip bulb, hanging like a semicolon in the endless sentence of winter. Not yet the green shaft rips the paper tunic in its upward thrust. Not yet knifes its tip through the topsoil, the stalk aspiring up to a swelling of petals, pale bud pursed and then loosened, deepening to red and unsealing itself sash by sash, a leggy dishabille in lipstick. Somewhere on the other side of town, some bells begin to raise their brazen. Everything is about to change. Okay, this is called Book of Hours, which is so like in Catholic worship, especially medieval Catholic worship, people would have these books of hours, which were meditative or devotional books that helped you sort of organize your day around prayers. So that's what this is called, a Book of Hours. A Pentecost of bloom, all the furred tongues a wag in the iris patch, wind rushed through the fire flower. To what wonders they may testify, I don't know. My earthy idiom hears as noise the hiss of sweet alyssum and the bee's melisma. Shouldn't that be enough? But I fidget around the garden like a wasp for nectar, greedy, antic, spoiling for the ruin of meaning. One long morning I looked thus at inkwork on trussed vellum, a gospel in cochineal and verdigris, gold leaf haloing the majuscule. The manuscript twined a black briar, stem and barb from margin to margin. No untangling that liturgy, no telling the prayers in its glittering pigments. Yet I adored each page, and bent to stare so low that my lips touched the serif of an illuminated T. I left the archive chrismed with turmeric, until, in the sudden rain, all that I kept of that book washed from me. The spirit's a terse mutter to the flesh's aria, but I'll forget today's ecstasies when the wind dies, forget their honeyed buzz when the bees hive up for evening. Against the stillness of that fast-approaching anesthetic dark, I nuzzle the humblest buds to my chin, dust the shyest pistils across my wrist, and when too noiselessly their petals brush my ear, I will declare them from my very lungs, and I will mouth the wind back upon itself. Paper white, incarnadine. Okay, last one. This is called Big Finish. Now that the last shaft of sunset has collapsed into that rubble of cloud, let's dust off and see how bright the stars are. The disclosed vault spinning like a disco ball been drilled smack into Polaris. My oracle's a bullhorn for the end times, portending wars and rumors of wars in the stars' course headlong through the heavens. And even though the astrophysicists, as in chorus to the oracle, declare that all this sparkle, every spectacular atom of it, is a death, the expired light of bodies that have burned themselves down to nothing, yet they are so bright and shimmery, and to shimmy seems their light to me. Sequins tilting into a spotlight. Don't they move like jubilation on their wheel? And don't they flash with brash abandon? And if finally they should quit their spheres and fall upon us, their apocalypse will surely seem a shower not of wormwood, but confetti, gleeful streaking down the sackcloth dark to pronounce our doom. A wop bop-a-loo-bop, a wop bam boom. Thanks very much. Steve is pointing me here. I guess I'll stay here. Yes?
When you write, how do you distinguish between, or how do you use both metaphor and simile? Because I feel like whenever I'm writing, I'm always saying, it's like this, it's like this. It is similar to, and yet not. But I want to be able to write and say, it is this, or it is this way, and not confuse the reader.
Well, metaphors do both, right? Like if you say, for example, as Shakespeare did, my love is a red, red rose, then you are asserting simultaneously, that's Shakespeare, right? Is that Shakespeare? Suddenly I've become uncertain of my reference. Help? Burns. Thank you. So you're simultaneously asserting that that your love is like a rose, which means that it has similar qualities to a rose, right? And that your love is not a rose because it's only like. So metaphor is doing two things at the same time. It's pulling things together, and it's insisting that they stay pushed apart from one another. So I don't really distinguish between the kinds of metaphor, I guess, when I'm writing. I'm thinking mostly about how I want to bring things next to each other and keep them tensely pushing against each other. I'm less interested in transformation than I am in tension, and I think that metaphor is an excellent device to incorporate tension into language because it operates on tension. That's sort of not what you were asking, but maybe my answer to the question is, don't worry about that. Worry about what the metaphor can do rather than which one you're using or which kind you're using. Yeah?
What has most affected your identity and ability as a poet right now? Does that make sense?
What has most affected my identity and ability as a poet right now? That would be Steve Tuttle. No, that would be rock and roll, for reals. Like I spend a lot of time listening to a lot of music at loud volumes. I am very interested in having the physical affirmation of that beat going on. I write when I'm running, and so there's a lot of physical beating going on anyway. And, you know, I should say that I don't think that most pop music has lyrics that are worth paying attention to because they have the scaffolding of music, but that's what I admire, right? I love the scaffolding of music, and if you take that away from me, what can I do? How can I replicate the effects that music has on me when I don't have the scaffolding of music to help me? So that's the answer. Plus, you know, I play a few instruments, not well enough to be on stage with anybody for more than like a couple minutes. That's an exaggeration. I shouldn't be on stage with anybody. So this is the only instrument I have. It's my compensation. I'm always I'm cognizant of my failures, and so language is the only thing that I can use to compensate for them. Yes? Is that Darlene? That's a bright light, dude. Yeah.
I have two questions for you about your prose poem.
Yes.
What are your considerations when you're deciding on genre for these particular pieces? And the other is, how is your process different when you're composing prose poems?
She asked, how is my process different when I'm composing prose poems? I'll start with that one. My process is not different at all because my prose poems may not have lineation, but I hope that they continue to have like a recurrent beat, a musicality, a sort of compression of stress going on and pivoting from sentence to sentence over their semantic axes rather than necessarily just their sonic axes. So I'm still just doing it while I run and thinking that way. But I will say that they were faster. To write the prose pieces, it was faster for me to do than when I write in lines. So I don't know what that means. But they did come out more quickly than a lineated poem. What was the other part of the question?
What are your considerations when you choose that genre?
What are my considerations when I choose? Can I say the form rather than the genre? What are my considerations when I choose a form? I mostly experience the world in lines. I process things through a sort of balance of music and sound, and so lines are a natural expression for me. The prose sections were not natural for me, but I was trying to disorient myself. I was trying to force myself into a new way of perceiving the sort of perception I was trying to engage with. So that poem, I purposely pursued a lack of lineation so that I would be forced to think about other things to keep me disoriented, I guess, if that makes sense. I didn't want that poem to make the moves that I was accustomed to making. So I had to stop myself. Yes?
So you mentioned that you listen to a lot of music.
Yeah. Yes.
Poetry. When you read your own poetry, is there music that you associate with your own poetry?
No, because like if I could write the music, dude, I'd be writing music. This is second place. Like I said, it's compensation. So no, I can't conceive of of what that might sound like. I aspire to it. I fantasize about it, but it's not something that I can't produce that awareness or those thoughts. I wish if you can do that, then high five, or maybe I'll hire you or something. Yes. Are you talking about my chakras? Are you really? How do I balance my colors when I'm writing a poem? Not meditation. I would say I think I'm being slightly facetious. I think that you're asking me how do I balance like the tones of the thing? I guess I follow the language. I'm not actually interested in my feelings at all, but I am really interested in how the language sounds, and so I try to follow the sounds to see what concerns they seem to be accumulating around, what patterns seem to be emerging, and I try and let that dictate how the thing develops as it goes. And sometimes the development requires a reinforcement of as you say, the tone that has already been established, and sometimes as you linger with a perception, your understanding of it changes, right? Like we all have this experience. This is what literature is for. It gets us to pay attention, and to pay attention then more closely, and then yet more closely, so that by the time you finish paying attention to something, your understanding of it has changed entirely. And so I guess that I am interested in charting the processes of thought and perception over the course of a poem, and to be accountable to the ways that our understanding really does change, the poem has to itself be able to change its mind or to sort of pivot on pieces of new understanding as it develops. Yeah. I think I would say that the sounds of the poems help to open up possibilities for what ideas might come next. Like I'm trying to think of an example of this. If I'm writing a poem that's really like low in tone, like I have to illustrate what I'm talking about. So this poem that I read, Cowpunch, starts out, "Unhobble your hardscrabble horses, soul." I'm not going to go to a bunch of E sounds next because I'm down in the guts, right? So the poem has already determined where physically its investment in the language is. And it would feel like an imposition to pivot immediately out of that. You have to develop out of that to a different set of sounds. Does that make sense? Okay. Anyone else? Yeah.
So you compose as you run?
Yes.
Could you describe that process, and in particular, how do you not forget everything?
I write a line a week. It's really slow. I don't forget a line. That's the process. But I'll go out and I'll put on my earbuds and I'll get out there and I'll just sort of think through sounds and say, okay, I've got this word going on. What's the next word? Like the one I'm not quite done with, right? The last word is care. There's stingered care. So I'm going to go out tonight and I'm going to be like, there's stingered care, there's stingered care. I'm going to play with the sounds and see what ideas, what other words are maybe in the neighborhood of those sounds. Stingered care, maybe stung, sting, like my mouth will be working and I forget that I'm running, but there's the beat, right? I got a beat and I've got the breath going on. So I've got this sort of built-in rhythm to the enterprise. And it just keeps going till the line's done. And then it's balanced and it sounds I think of a line as a field for presenting things that are in tension and then reconciling those tensions. And so I keep writing the line until the tensions get both presented and then sort of balanced or reconciled in some way. So, and those things might be ideational, they might be syntactic, they might be sonic, they might be rhythmic, all those things working together. Does that help? Okay, there's a hand. Yeah, Aaron!
Yeah, what tools do you use and have you used to discover language?
Tools?
Yeah, and how much is the act of writing itself for you a sort of discovery of language?
The tools I use to discover language is books. Read a lot of books. Read everything you get your hands on. Read the Smithsonian Magazine. Read the back of your cereal box. Read the junk mail that comes into you. Read outside your field. Read science magazines. Read, websites about global warming. I don't know. Read, suck in language wherever you can get it, because that's the only way that you can expand your vocabulary. So that you're sucking it in, not that it becomes a false performance, but it's a natural part of your vocabulary. So what else are you going to use if you know the word for it? Does that make sense? You just got to, read.
Do you have a particular way to collate things that interest you, or you just keep them in your brain?
Do I collate the things that interest me?
Do you have a process by which you're picking and choosing the things that are fascinating you?
No, have you met me? Okay, this is what it's like. Writing a poem is like this. I walk around my whole life with somebody doing this to me. And it gets irritating. Can you hear this? It's ongoing all the time until the poem is done. And during this process, when I'm going to the supermarket or picking up my kids for school or talking to you guys in classes or whatever, that is still going on until I find what I'm looking for. So you just got to, to mix a metaphor, you got to keep the antenna up all the time. So that when you come across some article or I told Adrian this the other day, I was reading a crappy novel that I'm embarrassed even to admit to having read, but there you go, I did it. And in the middle of this book was a word that I was like, that is the word that I have been looking for to solve this poem that I've been working on For like months I've been working, like 8-9 months I've been working on this poem, and I couldn't find my way around a corner in this poem. And there's this word in the middle of this crappy novel, and I'm like, ha, win. So you just have to like keep the antenna up all the time. And you accustom yourself to thinking of language not merely as transparent. You don't walk through your life having transparent conversations and using words casually, but being aware of all the different ways and textures and shapes that language has around you, so that you never allow language to become something that you can't hold in your hands and make use of. Because the minute that happens, then you stop treating it like it's the material for poetry, I guess. Is that long enough? We're good? We're good. Go have a cookie or a bagel or something. Thank you.